The notice taped to my door said my walkway was not compliant, and I had 72 hours to fix it or face a fine. I pulled it off the glass and read it twice in the freezing air, my breath fogging up the paper. I live in the Woodlands, Texas, in a condo complex called Maplewood Commons Neighborhood Association. I moved here 6 months ago because the rent was cheap and the commute to my barbershop was under 15 minutes. The HOA seemed normal at first, just monthly newsletters and reminders about trash day. Then winter hit and everything changed. My mental health had been fragile for a year after a bad breakup and a family loss, and the last thing I needed was someone harassing me about snow. The notice was not signed, but I knew exactly who wrote it. Stephanie Whitaker. Everyone called her Deborah behind her back because she had that energy. She ran the social committee, which meant she spent her time policing everyone else instead of planning events. She had tight black curls that poked out from under burgundy earmuffs, and she wore a black parka everywhere like she was preparing for the apocalypse. I had seen her around the complex, always holding a clipboard, always frowning at something. The complaint said my shoveled path was too narrow. I had cleared a walkway from my door to the parking lot the morning after the storm, same as most of my neighbors. The path was about 2 feet wide, which seemed fine to me. Apparently it was not fine to Deborah. I crumpled the notice and went inside to look up the HOA rules. The website was a mess, half the links broken, but I found a PDF of the covenant. There was nothing about walkway width. There was a vague line about maintaining safe egress during inclement weather, but no measurements. I took a screenshot and saved it to a folder on my phone. I had a feeling this was not going to be a one-time thing. The next morning I got a text from my buddy Eric, another homeowner 2 buildings over. He said Deborah had been posting in the HOA Facebook group about non-compliant snow removal and hinting that enforcement was coming. I did not use Facebook much, so I logged in and found the group. Sure enough, there was a post from the day before. It did not name anyone, but it talked about residents who think the rules do not apply to them and how the board was watching. The comments were a mix of people agreeing and a few asking what the actual rule was. Deborah replied to one of them saying the standard was clear and violators would be held accountable. I felt my stomach drop. This was targeted. I had requested copies of the HOA budget and the vendor contracts 2 weeks earlier because I wanted to see where my fees were going. The management company sent me a receipt confirmation, but never sent the documents. Now I was getting notices. I decided to shovel the path wider just to avoid the fight. I went out that afternoon with my old plastic shovel and cleared another foot on each side. My shoulders were sore and my hands were freezing by the time I finished. I took photos of the path from 3 angles and timestamped them in a notes app. I felt ridiculous doing it, but I had a bad feeling Deborah was building a file on me. I went to work the next day and told one of my regulars, an older guy named Ron who had lived in the complex for 10 years. He laughed and said Deborah did this to everyone who asked questions. He said she had tried to fine him for parking his truck in a guest spot overnight, even though the rules allowed it. He fought it and won, but it took 3 months and a lawyer letter. He said the key was documentation. Keep everything. Print everything. Never assume they are acting in good faith. That same week I got an email from the management company saying my account had a $50 assessment for a violation correction fee. No details, no invoice, just a line item charge. I replied asking for clarification and proof of the violation. They sent back a boilerplate response saying all violations were logged and fees were applied per the schedule. I replied again, this time attaching my photos of the widened path and asking which specific rule I violated. No response. I waited 3 days and then sent a certified letter to the management company and the HOA board demanding the documents I had requested 2 weeks earlier, plus an explanation of the fee. I kept a copy of everything in a blue 3-ring binder with dividers. I labeled the first tab Storm 1. 2 days later, Deborah knocked on my door. I opened it and she was standing there in her black parka and burgundy earmuffs holding a clipboard. She said she needed to inspect my unit for compliance. I asked compliance with what? She said general standards. I said I was not letting her in without written notice and a specific reason. She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. She said, you are going to do this the easy way or the hard way. I said I would take the hard way if it meant following the actual rules. She wrote something on her clipboard and said fine, then I should expect further action. She turned and walked away. My heart was pounding. I closed the door and immediately called Ron. He said that was classic Debra. He said she used intimidation because most people folded. He said, do not fold. The next violation notice came 3 days later. This one said my parking pass was displayed incorrectly and my vehicle was subject to towing. I went outside and checked my windshield. The pass was right there, hanging from the rearview mirror, same as it had been for 6 months. I took a photo. Then I noticed Debra standing near the mailboxes watching me. I walked over and asked what the problem was. She said the pass had to be visible from the street, not just from the driver's side. I said that was not in the rules. She said it was an unwritten standard enforced by the towing company. I said unwritten standards are not enforceable. She leaned in close and said, I can have your car gone in 10 minutes. Then she walked away. I went back inside and started digging. I pulled up the towing contract from the HOA website archives. It was from 3 years ago and it listed a company called Lone Star Towing. I called them and asked if they had a contract with Maplewood Commons. The guy on the phone said they used to, but the contract ended last year. I asked who had it now. He said he was not sure, but he thought it went to a smaller outfit. I thanked him and hung up. Then I called the management company and asked for a copy of the current towing vendor agreement. They said it was not a public document. I said Texas law requires HOA contracts over a certain amount to be available to homeowners. They said they would get back to me. They never did. That night, I got a call from my neighbor across the hall, a quiet woman in her 60s named Linda. She said she saw Debra taking photos of my car earlier and thought I should know. I thanked her and asked if she had seen Debra do this to anyone else. Linda paused, then said yes. She said Debra had targeted 3 people in the past year, all of them right after they asked for records or complained about fees. Linda said she had been keeping screenshots of Debra's Facebook posts because some of them were borderline harassment. I asked if she would be willing to share them. She said yes, but only if I promised not to say where they came from. I promised. Linda sent me the screenshots that night. There were a dozen of them. Most were passive-aggressive posts in the HOA group about residents who did not respect the community or who thought they were special. A few were direct replies to people asking budget questions, and Debra's tone was hostile. One reply said something like, if you do not trust the board, maybe this is not the right place for you. Another said, we do not owe you a breakdown of every penny, we are volunteers. I saved everything to a folder and added a second tab to my binder. I labeled it Storm 2. The HOA scheduled a winter hearing for the following Thursday at 10 in the morning. The notice came via email with less than 48 hours warning. It said I was required to appear to address multiple violations and that failure to attend would result in automatic fines. The timing was impossible. A major winter storm was forecast to hit Wednesday night into Thursday morning, and the roads were expected to be a mess. I replied to the email pointing out the safety issue and asking to reschedule. The response came from Debra. She said the hearing was mandatory and that weather was not an excuse. She said if I cared about my standing in the community, I would make it work. I called Ron again. He said this was retaliation, plain and simple. He said the HOA was not supposed to schedule hearings with less than a week notice unless it was an emergency, and snow complaints were not emergencies. He said I should show up if I could, bring everything I had, and record the whole thing. I said I was not sure I could handle the stress. My chest had been tight for days and I was barely sleeping. Ron said he understood, but giving in now would only make it worse. He said Debra fed on fear. He said the only way to stop her was to stand up with evidence. The storm hit hard Wednesday night. I woke up Thursday to 6 inches of fresh snow and ice coating everything. The roads were not plowed yet. The complex parking lot was a mess of ruts and slush. I got dressed, grabbed my binder, and drove to the clubhouse where the hearing was being held. The drive took twice as long as normal. I almost slid into a curb once. When I got there, Debra was already inside with 2 other board members. The room was cold and the heater was struggling. Debra sat at the head of a folding table with her clipboard. She looked at me and said, "Glad you could make it. You are going to do this the easy way or the hard way." I sat down and opened my binder. Debra started reading off a list of violations. Walkway width insufficient. parking pass improperly displayed, failure to respond to correction notices. I interrupted and said I had responded to everything in writing and provided photo evidence. She said my responses were not satisfactory. I asked what the actual measurements were for a compliant walkway. She said it was a judgment call. I asked who made the judgment. She said the social committee, which meant her. I asked if there was any documentation of that authority. She said it was implied. I opened my binder to the covenant screenshot and slid it across the table. I said there was nothing in the rules about walkway width and nothing giving the social committee enforcement power. One of the other board members, a guy in his 50s, leaned over and looked at the screenshot. He frowned. Deborah said the rules were subject to interpretation and that my attitude was making things worse. I asked about the $50 fee. Deborah said it was a standard violation correction charge. I asked for the invoice. She said it was already sent. I said I never received it. She made a note on her clipboard. I asked about the towing threat. She said the parking pass rule was clear and that enforcement would begin immediately. I said the pass was displayed exactly as it had been for 6 months. She said standards change. I said not without notice. The other board member coughed and said maybe we should table this until the management company could provide the full file. Deborah shot him a look. She said there was no need to delay. The violations were documented. I said I wanted to see the documentation. She said it was in the system. I said I wanted a printed copy. She said that was not how it worked. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes. I said I had time-stamped photos, email records, and a certified mail receipt showing I had requested documents weeks ago. I said I also had screenshots of Deborah's Facebook posts targeting homeowners who asked questions. Deborah's face went red. She said social media was irrelevant. I said harassment was not irrelevant. The room went quiet. The third board member, a woman in her 40s, shifted in her seat and said maybe we should continue this another time. Deborah said no. She said I was deflecting and that the violations stood. I said I wanted everything in writing with specific rule citations, and I wanted the budget and vendor contracts I had requested. Deborah stood up and said the meeting was over. She said I would receive a formal decision by mail. Then, she left. I sat there for a minute after she left. The other 2 board members looked uncomfortable. The guy said off the record, "You should get a lawyer." He said Deborah had a history of pushing people until they moved out or stopped asking questions. He said the management company usually backed her because she did all the volunteer work and they did not want to lose her. I thanked him and left. I sat in my car in the parking lot with the engine running, trying to calm down. My hands were shaking. I opened my binder and added a new tab. I labeled it Storm 3. That weekend, a truck showed up at my building. 2 guys in coveralls got out and started measuring my walkway. I went outside and asked what they were doing. They said the HOA hired them to bring the property into compliance. I said I did not authorize any work. They said the HOA did. I asked for a work order. They did not have one. I said they needed to leave. They called someone, talked for a minute, then packed up and left. I took photos of their truck and the license plate. Then I called the management company and left a voicemail saying I did not consent to any work on my property and that sending vendors without authorization was trespassing. No one called back. Linda texted me that afternoon. She said Deborah had been in the parking lot earlier taking more photos of cars. She said Deborah was also talking to the towing company on the phone and pointing at vehicles. Linda said she took a video from her window. I asked if she would send it to me. She said yes, but she was scared Deborah would retaliate if she found out. I said I would keep her name out of it. She sent the video. It was shaky but clear enough. Deborah was standing next to a white pickup truck with a tow logo on the door, pointing at 3 cars and gesturing. You could not hear the conversation, but the body language was obvious. I started building a timeline. I went back through my email and pulled every message from the management company and every notice from Deborah. I printed them all and put them in the binder in chronological order. I wrote notes in the margins. I highlighted contradictions. The management company had sent me a compliance acknowledgement in October saying my parking pass was valid through the end of the lease year. Now Deborah was threatening to tow me for the same pass. I also found an email from September where the board treasurer mentioned that the social committee did not have enforcement authority and that any violations had to go through the full board. I printed that too. Monday morning, I got another notice. This one said my vehicle registration was expired and the car had to be moved within 24 hours. I checked my registration. It was valid until March. I took a photo of the sticker and the notice side by side. Then I called the police non-emergency line and asked if I could file a report for harassment. The dispatcher said I could come to the station and talk to an officer. I said I would. Before I could leave, Deborah showed up at my door again. She had the same clipboard. She said she was there to document the parking violation in person. I said there was no violation. She said my registration sticker was not visible. I said it was right there on the windshield. She said it was obstructed by snow. I looked outside. There was no snow on my windshield. I had cleared it that morning. She made a note and said the tow company had been notified. I said if my car got towed, I would sue her personally. She smiled and said, "You are going to do this the easy way or the hard way." I let her walk away. Then I called Linda. I said I needed her help. I said if she was willing to go on record with the screenshots and the video, I could take everything to the police and maybe stop this. Linda was quiet for a long time. Then she said yes. She said she was tired of watching Deborah bully people. She said she would meet me at the station. We went that afternoon. The officer at the desk listened to the whole story and looked through my binder. He looked at Linda's screenshots and the video. He said it sounded like harassment, but that HOA disputes were usually civil matters. I said I understood that, but I wanted a paper trail in case it escalated. He said that was smart. He took a statement from both of us and gave me a case number. He said if Deborah made any threats or damaged my property, I should call immediately. I thanked him and left. I felt a little bit better, but not much. The management company finally sent me the documents I requested. They arrived in a massive PDF with no organization. Budget line items, vendor contracts, meeting minutes, all jumbled together. I spent 2 nights going through it. I found 3 things. First, the towing contract was with a company called Apex Towing, not Lone Star. Second, the contract specified that towing required photographic evidence of a violation and a 24-hour notice period. Third, the social committee budget showed payments to Apex Towing that did not match any logged violations. The timestamps were all in the past 6 months. I cross-referenced them with the meeting minutes. None of the payments were discussed or approved by the full board. I printed the pages and added them to Storm 2. I called Ron again and told him what I found. He said that was fraud. He said if Deborah was coordinating with the towing company off the books, that was a kickback scheme. He said I needed to get that in front of the full board, not just Deborah and her friends. I asked how. He said the annual meeting was in 2 weeks. He said any homeowner could submit an agenda item with 72 hours notice. I checked the bylaws. He was right. I drafted an agenda request asking the board to review the towing contract and explain the undisclosed payments. I submitted it via certified email and kept the receipt. Deborah called me the next day. She was furious. She said I was wasting everyone's time with baseless accusations. I said I was exercising my rights as a homeowner. She said I was making enemies. I said I was asking for transparency. She said, "You are going to regret this." Then she hung up. I saved the call log and added it to the binder. The week before the meeting, Linda texted me. She said Deborah had been going door to door telling people I was trying to sabotage the HOA and raise fees. She said some neighbors were buying it. I asked if she would come to the meeting and speak. She said she would try, but she was scared. I said I understood. I said I would protect her name as long as I could. I spent that week preparing. I made copies of everything in the binder. I wrote a 3-minute statement summarizing the violations, the fake fees, the towing threats, and the undisclosed payments. I practiced it out loud until I could say it without shaking. I also reached out to a local attorney who did HOA work. He said a consultation was $200. I paid it. He looked at everything and said I had a strong case for harassment and possible fraud. He said if the board did not act, I could file a complaint with the Texas Attorney General. He gave me his card and said to call if things got worse. The night before the meeting, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about Deborah's face, the way she smiled when she threatened me. I kept thinking about my car getting towed, about more fees piling up, about having to move again because I could not afford the fight. My chest hurt. I got up and made tea and sat at the kitchen table with the binder open in front of me. I had 3 tabs now. Storm 1, Storm 2, Storm 3. I had photos, emails, screenshots, call logs, contract pages, budget spreadsheets. I had Linda's video. I had the police case number. I had everything except the one thing I needed most, which was proof that Deborah knew she was lying. Then I remembered something. Back in September, before any of this started, I had submitted an architectural request to replace my front door weather stripping. It was peeling and letting cold air in. The form was online and I uploaded photos. I got an approval email a week later. I had forgotten about it because I ended up hiring a handyman who did the work in October. But the approval was on file. I searched my email and found it. The approval was signed by the architectural committee chair. I looked up who that was. It was Deborah. I opened the attachment. The approval letter had my name, my unit number, and a description of the work. It also had a sentence at the bottom, no further action required. Work approved as submitted. I stared at it for a long time. Then I checked the complaint log that the management company had sent in the document dump. There was an entry from November filed by the social committee, which was Deborah, claiming I had done unauthorized exterior work. The dates did not match. The complaint was filed 6 weeks after the approval. I printed both documents and put them in Storm 3. I let her call my bluff, because she did not realize I was not bluffing. The meeting was chaos. The clubhouse was packed. Deborah sat at the front table with 3 other board members. I sat in the 3rd row with my binder on my lap. Linda was in the back. The meeting started with routine business, budget updates, landscaping bids. Then they got to my agenda item. Deborah stood up and said I had raised concerns about the towing vendor and she wanted to address them directly. She said the contract was reviewed annually and that all payments were proper. She said any issues with individual violations were between homeowners and the management company. She said the board had full confidence in the process. I raised my hand. The board president, a tired-looking man in his 60s, nodded at me. I stood up and said I had evidence that the process was not being followed. I said the towing contract required 24-hour notice and photographic evidence, and I had received neither. I said I also had records showing payments to the towing company that were not disclosed in the meeting minutes. Deborah interrupted and said I was misreading the documents. I said I would be happy to share them with the room. I opened my binder and pulled out the contract pages. I passed copies down the row. People started reading. Deborah's face went red. The board president asked Deborah if she had an explanation. She said the payments were for legitimate services and that I was twisting the facts. I said I also had a video of Deborah coordinating with the tow truck driver in the parking lot without following the contract procedure. Deborah stood up and said that was a lie. I said I had the video. She said I was harassing her. I said I had a police case number for her harassing me. The room went silent. One of the homeowners in the front row, a woman I did not know, raised her hand and said she had also been threatened with towing after asking about fees. Another guy said the same thing. A third person said Deborah had posted his license plate number in the Facebook group and called him a freeloader. The board president held up his hand and said we needed to table this and investigate. Deborah said there was nothing to investigate. I said I had one more thing. I pulled out the approval letter for the weather stripping and the complaint log entry. I said Deborah approved my work in September and then filed a complaint about the same work in November. I said that was retaliation. Deborah said she did not remember approving it. I said I had her signature. I held up the letter. She grabbed for it. I pulled it back. The board president said enough. He said the board would review everything and respond within 2 weeks. He said no enforcement actions would be taken until the review was complete. Deborah said that was unacceptable. He said it was final. She grabbed her clipboard and walked out. The meeting ended 5 minutes later. People came up to me afterwards and thanked me. One guy said he was going to file his own complaint. Linda caught my eye from the back and nodded. 2 days later, I got an email from the management company. They said they were missing my dispute documents and I needed to resubmit everything. I replied with screenshots showing I had already submitted everything twice. They said their system did not show it. I said I had certified mail receipts. They said they would look into it. I sent everything again, this time with read receipts enabled. I also sent copies to every board member individually. I kept a log of every send. Deborah started a new campaign. She posted in the Facebook group every day about residents who were disrupting the community and costing everyone money. She did not name me, but it was obvious. She said some people thought they were above the rules and that the board needed to take a harder line. A few people agreed with her. Most stayed quiet. One person commented saying maybe the board should focus on transparency instead of enforcement. Deborah replied saying transparency was a smokescreen for people who did not want to pay their fair share. I screenshot everything. Then the twist hit. I got a call from the board president. He said the HOA insurance carrier had received multiple harassment complaints and was threatening to drop coverage unless the board took action. He said the complaints were not just from me. He said 3 other homeowners had filed reports in the past 2 months, all involving Deborah. He said the insurance company considered it a liability risk. He said the board was holding an emergency meeting to discuss it. I asked if I could attend. He said it was executive session, but he would let me know the outcome. The emergency meeting happened 2 days later. I did not go, but Linda texted me updates. She said the board voted to remove Deborah from the social committee and bar her from any enforcement activities. She said Deborah argued for an hour and threatened to sue. She said the board stood firm because the insurance issue was existential. If the carrier dropped them, the complex would be uninsurable and property values would tank. Deborah finally left. Linda said she looked like she was going to explode. I thought that was the end of it. It was not. The next morning I went out to my car and found a handwritten note tucked under the wiper. It said, "You think you won, but you just made it worse. Watch your back." I took a photo of the note and called the police. The same officer I had talked to before came out and took a report. He said the note was not explicitly a threat, but combined with everything else, it was part of a harassment pattern. He said he would go talk to Deborah and issue a warning. I said thank you. The officer came back an hour later. He said he spoke to Deborah at her unit and advised her that any further contact with me or retaliation would result in a criminal harassment charge. He said she denied writing the note but admitted she was upset about being removed from the committee. He said she promised to stay away from me. He gave me a copy of the report and said to call if anything else happened. I put the report in the binder under Storm 3. The final board meeting of the year was scheduled for mid-December. I submitted another agenda item asking for a formal apology and a refund of the $50 fee. I also asked the board to adopt a written anti-retaliation policy. The meeting was packed again. Deborah was there, sitting in the back with her arms crossed. She did not say anything during the regular business. When my item came up, the board president said the board had reviewed the complaints and determined that enforcement procedures had not been followed. He said the $50 fee would be refunded and that the board was drafting a new policy on homeowner rights and dispute resolution. He said the policy would include penalties for board members who abused their positions. Deborah stood up and said this was a witch hunt. She said she had volunteered hundreds of hours and this was how the board repaid her. She said she was resigning from the HOA entirely. The board president said that was her choice. She looked at me and said, "I can have your car gone in 10 minutes. I stood up and held up my phone. I said I had been recording since the meeting started. I said I also had a copy of the tow company call log showing she had contacted them 6 times in 2 weeks trying to get cars towed without proper documentation. I said I was going to email the log to every homeowner in the complex so everyone could see what she had been doing. I tapped send. My phone buzzed. Deborah's face went white. She walked out and slammed the door. The board president cleared his throat. He said the board took these matters seriously and appreciated my diligence. He said the refund would be processed within 10 days. He said the new policy would be voted on at the next meeting. I sat down. Linda gave me a thumbs up from across the room. Another homeowner leaned over and whispered thank you. After the meeting, I walked out to the parking lot with Linda. She said she was proud of me. She said most people would have moved or given up. I said I almost did. She said the screenshots and the video made the difference. I said her courage made the difference. We stood there in the cold for a minute, watching the snow fall under the parking lot lights. It felt like the first time I could breathe in weeks. The refund came through 9 days later. The board adopted the anti-retaliation policy in January. Deborah moved out of the complex in February. I heard from Ron that she tried to start the same thing at her new place and got shut down immediately because word had spread. The management company sent an apology letter and said they were implementing new training for board members. I kept the binder on my shelf as a reminder. Storm 1. Storm 2. Storm 3. I still live at Maplewood Commons. The new social committee actually plans events now instead of harassing people. I still cut hair and hear neighborhood gossip, but now people come to me with HOA problems because they know I fought back and won. My mental health is better. I sleep through the night most of the time. I do not worry about my car getting towed or fake fees showing up. I learned that documentation is everything, that allies matter, and that bullies only win if you let them. The borough tried to break me with paperwork and threats, but I had something she did not. I had proof, I had patience, and I had people who were willing to stand up when it mattered. That made all the difference.